Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtatarasata Shishimad His Divine Grace Abhayachan Aravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Okay, so today we're going to be discussing a bit about Mahaprabhu's pastimes in Puri, specifically the pastimes of the Lord, especially during the time when, from the Sena Yatra period all the way until the Ratha Yatra period, because this is the current period we are also observing here, very fortunately, by the mercy of the Lord, that we're also able to experience or relish the same pastimes that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited many years ago. So here we'll be discussing from Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai, Shri Gaur Nitai Bhagavan Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande. So basically here, we're going to be discussing from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 11, 12, 13 and 14, because we'll be going through a two-part sort of seminar or class or discussion. We'll be going through 11 and 12 today. Chapter 11 is titled The Veda Kirtan Pastimes, and Chapter 12 is entitled The Cleaning of the Gundicha Temple. So, just a bit of a background. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he manifested his pastimes within this material world for 48 years. So, he spent half of that in Navadvip and the other half in Jagannath Puri. Now, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he briefly touches on the first 24 years in Adi Lila without making sort of breaking the etiquette of trying to speak more than what the previous Acharya has mentioned. So whatever Vrindavan Das Thakur hadn't mentioned in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Kaviraj Goswami mentions in Adi Lila. In Madhya Lila you've got the next 6 years of Mahaprabhu having taken sannyas. He enters into Jagannath Puri. And the last 18 years of his life, or 18 years of his manifest pastimes in this world, is the Antya Leela's contents. So, Mahaprabhu, after taking sannyas, comes to Puri, and when he comes to Puri, then he liberates Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And then it's mentioned a couple of months later, he decides to go on his tour of South India. And that tour of South India takes 2 years. So the first 2 years of his stay in Jagannath Puri is spent traveling South India. So in the third year when he comes back, that's when these particular pastimes happen. The Veda Kirtan pastimes and the explanation of how Mahaprabhu observed Ratha Yatra. Of course, for the next 3 years he performed these pastimes, and of course for the next 21 years, technically speaking, he did perform the same pastimes. He observed Ratha Yatra. But the Ratha Yatra mentioned specifically here is of the, you could say his 27th year or 27th year of manifest pastimes. So in the Madhya Lila chapter 11, the Veda Kirtan pastimes begins with how, hearing of Mahaprabhu coming back to Puri, King Prataparudra, the king of Orissa at that time, he was a pure devotee of the Lord, but he had heard about Mahaprabhu, had heard about Mahaprabhu's pastimes in Puri just before he left for South India. And who did he hear it from? He heard it from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya actually experienced it firsthand, the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, the interesting thing here is that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is actually the chief, I guess, advisor of Maharaj Prataparudra. So anything that's in regards to Jagannath temple, Maharaj Prataparudra would always seek the advice of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So here, having heard that the ocean of mercy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, has finally come back to Puri, and all the devotees, just like how rivers come and merge into the sea, similarly the devotees came from all different places to come and see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it's mentioned here that the next day when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had come, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya then went and approached Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And his request to the Lord is to kindly give Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya his darshan. And Mahaprabhu, being a very strict sannyasi, because he wanted to teach the world by his example, so he told Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, what are you asking me to do? How can you ask me, a renunciate, to meet a worldly man? And actually Mahaprabhu even says to the point that, why are you requesting such an undesirable thing from me? Since I am in the renounced order, it is dangerous for me to meet a king as to meet a woman. To meet either would be just like drinking poison. So Mahaprabhu was very, very, very strict to the dot in terms of his sannyas ashram. And that's why he's known as the sannyas ceremony, the crest jewel of all the sannyasis. Now Mahaprabhu also then tells him that although you may say the king is a great devotee of Lord Jagannath and he's a great devotee, he is still nonetheless a king. And he says that just as milk, if you put even a drop of poison in it, it still becomes poisonous. There's nothing you can do to remove that. Rather, if you put alcohol in that milk, there's nothing you can do to get rid of the alcohol. It remains untouchable. So similarly, even though he's a devotee, if he's got the word attached king to him, then he's immediately affected by worldly contamination. But it wasn't the case with King Prataparudra. Maharaj Prataparudra was a very pure devotee, as you'll hear later on in these two chapters specifically. So in this particular 11th chapter, it begins this way, how Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya puts forward a request to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to see King Prataparudra. Then it's mentioned that previously on his South Indian tour, he had met Ramananda Roy. And it is at the end of their discussion, or at the end of their meeting, Mahaprabhu said, you should pack up everything and come to Puri and meet me. So then when Mahaprabhu came to Puri, Ramananda Roy and King Prataparudra then came to Puri at that time, at the same time together. Whereas Prataparudra went to his palace, Ramananda Roy went and met Mahaprabhu directly. So then that's discussed here, the conversation and the intimate dealings between both Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy. After that, it talks about how Maharaj Prataparudra met Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya at the same time, and how Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya told Prataparudra Maharaj about how Mahaprabhu wasn't willing to see him, and how Prataparudra Maharaj, after being very, very, very despondent, was willing to give up his kingdom, even his life, if he wasn't able to take the association of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So then that's when Bhattacharya gives him the idea that you should go to the Gundicha garden at this particular time, you should recite this, give up your kingly costume, take up a mendicate's costume, so on and so forth. After that, we hear about the Ratha Yatra pastime, and then how the Bengali devotees arrive to Puri, and then it talks about Mahaprabhu's Beda pastime. Beda is another name for circumambulating. So at this particular pastime, Mahaprabhu took all the devotees from Bengal and all the other devotees in Puri and did a whole kirtan circumambulating Jagannath temple. So that's how the chapter ends. Krishna willing, we'll talk a bit more about chapter 12. Chapter 12 talks about the details of how Maharaj Prataparudra wanted to meet Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In chapter 11, it's just briefly mentioned. Chapter 12, Kaviraj Goswami then gives the more intimate details of how it expired, what happened, how the whole idea of Maharaj Prataparudra getting the darshan of the Lord at the Gundicha temple happened. Then Mahaprabhu then decides that we should do cleaning of the Gundicha temple, so that whole Gundicha Marjanam or Gundicha temple cleaning pastime happens. During that pastime, Advaita Acharya's son Gopal, he faints and passes away, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revives him. Then it's, as usual, kirtan, and then it ends with some prasadam. So it talks about how Mahaprabhu served prasadam and how the devotees honored that prasadam in the garden. And finally that chapter ends with the Netrotsava. That's when Lord Jagannath finally appears after 14 days of what Prabhupada says, renovating, how he gets repainted and how he then comes into the public darshan again after being sick. So that's how these two chapters go. Chapter, like I was mentioning before, once Bhattacharya meets Mahaprabhu after getting the request from King Prataparudra to please kindly give me darshan of the Lord, please arrange something for me, Mahaprabhu strictly and vehemently denied. Under the grounds of sannyasa ashram dharma, he told him, I cannot associate with a king because that contamination will then befall upon me, and plus what will people speak that a sannyasi or a mendicant who has nothing to do with kings has gone and met a king. So Mahaprabhu then, he denies that request, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, being very, very despondent, he goes and relays the message to King Prataparudra, and King Prataparudra starts to lament. And he laments so much so that he starts saying to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that, you know, if I can't take the association of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if I can't take darshan of the Lord, what's the use of my life? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has descended to deliver all fallen conditioned souls. He's even delivered Jaga and Madai, but he has not delivered this one lowly king called King Prataparudra. And so he starts lamenting in this way, saying that it is my great unfortune and it is better I just give up all of these things and live as a mendicant. Hopefully in a future birth I'll be able to take the association of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya becomes very, very astonished by the devotion the king shows, and at the same time he becomes very disturbed that if the king suddenly does something like this, it will cause a big problem for the whole kingdom. So then he decides, my dear king, just be patient, here's an idea I have. That you go during the Ratha Yatra festival, Mahaprabhu will be chanting and dancing, and he'll become very, very, very exhausted after he's chanting and dancing, and he'll take rest in the Gudicha temple garden. There, while he's lying there, you should immediately give up your kingly vesh or your kingly form or costume, clothes, and there you should go and approach Mahaprabhu. And massaging his lotus feet, you should recite the Gopi Geet, the prayer, I guess the prayers or the song sung by the gopis when Krishna left them in the forest after the Ras Leela. So, or during the Rasa Leela. So then, when you sing this, Mahaprabhu, out of his ecstasy, he will not consider whether you're a king or not. He won't consider anything like that, and will immediately embrace you out of gratitude. And then you'll get the mercy of the Lord finally bestowed upon you. And so hearing that, Maharaj Prataparudra becomes a bit pacified, and he waits patiently for that day to come. Now, meanwhile, Ramananda Roy, who had accompanied Prataparudra Maharaj back to Puri from Cuttack. So you see, Ramananda Roy, I've forgotten where Rajamandri. He had gone from South India all the way to the capital of the king, Cuttack, to tell the Maharaj, tell him that please let me give up my position. I would like to retire now, and I would like to go to Puri, and I would like to serve Mahaprabhu. Details of this interaction is given in the next chapter, so we'll go over that later. But now it talks about how Ramananda Roy met Mahaprabhu in Puri. And this meeting between Ramananda Roy and Mahaprabhu is very sweet, because you see, Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy, they share a very intimate relationship, being Krishna and Arjuna. So when Ramananda Roy came back to Puri, Mahaprabhu embraced him, and they both started showing ecstatic emotions. And seeing the ecstatic emotions that these two shared, people became astonished. And seeing the situation, time, place and circumstance, then Ramananda Roy immediately started telling the Lord why he had come there. Like, I had come after I met Maharaj Prataparudra, and he asked me, you had asked me to retire from work, so I had requested him for that as well. But see here, this is the thing. that when I went to the king and told him my situation, how I wanted to give up my position to retire to serve you in Puri, he was extremely pleased just by hearing your name. In fact, he got off his throne and held me by my hand and embraced me out of great affection. And seeing this, I understood how great a devotee he is of yours. And so immediately hearing that, he told me that, I immediately grant your desire. You are now retired and your pension is the same as your wage. Generally that doesn't happen. Your pension is like a small fraction of what you earned throughout your life. But the king, hearing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's name, immediately thought, let me serve Ramananda Roy. And let me give him a full pension so he serves Mahaprabhu to his heart's content without worrying about his own maintenance. So he was endeavoring to engage in devotional service in such a way to please Ramananda Roy. And we'll come to that point again in the 12th chapter where Kaviraj Goswami brings that point out much more to the light. But here then once he mentions that to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he also mentions that Prataparuja started to lament. He started saying, I'm most fallen and abominable, and I am unfit to receive an interview with the Lord. One's life is successful if one engages in his service. For a devotee, the mood of a pure devotee is not so much the hankering for liberation. Because in material existence we are suffering from the threefold miseries. Adi Deva, Adi Atmik and Adi Bhautik Klesh. And these miseries are causing such a difficult position that we do not know where to go, what to do. And we engage in activities hoping to douse that fire. But then what happens by trying to douse that fire, it causes the fire to grow even stronger. So we are suffering in that way. But if you see here, the devotees are not so much concerned about getting rid of all these material miseries. Yes, in the beginning of devotional service for neophyte conditioned souls, that's the first goal. We come to devotional service, we feel, the cooling rays of devotional service, give peace and satisfaction to the heart. But there needs to be more to it. And the real goal of devotional service is to please the Lord. So we follow in the footsteps of the pure devotees who are always hankering for the service of the Lord. So Maharaj Prataparuja, by saying this in his humility, is showing how great a Vaishnava he is. This is all the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's inconceivable and it's very difficult to understand how the devotees take part in such a drama for the pleasure of the Lord. It appears that Maharaj Prataparuja is just another ordinary materialist. But by hearing about Kaviraj Goswami about Maharaj Prataparuja's mood and his dealings with the devotees, you can understand his status of devotional service. And this was just a way for the Lord to increase his loving devotion for him. So then he continues to say, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, the son of Maharaj Nanda. He is very merciful, and I hope that in a future birth he will allow me an interview. My Lord, I don't think there is even a fraction of Maharaj Prataparuja's loving devotion, ecstasy in me. So this is what Ramananda Roy tells Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that I don't even think that a fraction of that loving ecstasy that he's displayed is present within me. So again, Ramananda Roy's humility is showing us how we should be acting in devotional service, what we should be aiming for or trying to attain. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, being very pleased, hearing of these dealings between his devotees, especially of the mood of Ramananda Roy, he tells Ramananda Roy that actually, my dear Ramananda Roy, you are the foremost of all devotees of Krishna. Therefore, whoever loves you is certainly a very fortunate person. Because the king has shown so much love for you, Lord Krishna will certainly accept him. So the main point here to understand is that actually Kaviraj Goswami mentions that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then talks about, quotes different verses. Ye me bhakta jana parta, na me bhaktas chate jana, mad bhaktanam chaye bhaktas, te me bhakta tamamataha. Which is quite interesting. Krishna is telling Arjuna this in the Adi Puran, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling Ramananda Roy here in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, that those who are my direct devotees are not actually my devotees, but those who are the devotees of my servant are factually my devotees. So a very important point to hear or to note is that Prataparuja Maharaj was successful in his attempts to serve the Lord by taking his darshan only by the mercy of the devotees. And that's exemplified in the next chapter once again. So then, this is when Ramananda Roy then finishes speaking with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about this subject matter. Mahaprabhu introduces Ramananda Roy to all the devotees present, and Ramananda Roy pays the obeisances and reciprocates with them accordingly. Now, after this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asks Ramananda Roy, "My dear Ramananda Roy, have you seen Jagannath? Have you taken darshan of the Lord yet? The Kamala Nayana, the lotus-eyed Lord." And Ramananda Roy says, "No, I came here immediately to see you." And then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "What have you done? How come you have not gone and see the Lord first?" And then Ramananda Roy says, "Look, my body is a chariot and the heart is the driver. Wherever the heart goes, the body must follow. And you have taken my heart. So I immediately came here." And Mahaprabhu felt extremely pleased and satisfied. But he told that immediately go to Lord Jagannath's temple and see the Lord, and then go home and meet your family members. And so then, having received Mahaprabhu's permission, Ramananda Roy leaves that situation. So then, going back to the king's palace in Puri, that's when he meets Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya 3 days before Snan Yatra. And that's when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya gives him the idea. Go and meet the Lord during this place at this time and do this. Then when the king hears of this, then he says, "Okay, how many days till Snan Yatra?" And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says, "There's 3 days more." So you can understand immediately what went on in the mind of King Prataparudra was that when is that day going to come? Because Snan Yatra is there. After Snan Yatra, they have to wait 14 days until Ratha Yatra. And then after that, you have to wait because the Lord then goes to Gundicha temple. And then after that, there's a return Rath as well. After a week, I believe. So then you have that situation there. So Prataparudra Maharaj's mind is now calculating and making plans on how to serve the Lord when that day is going to come. So his eagerness begins from that point in time. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya also tells him that because of Ramananda Roy's description of you to Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu's heart's becoming softer and softer. So this is Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya telling the king that yes, your desires will be fulfilled very soon. So then Snan Yatra comes along. When Snan Yatra comes, it's mentioned Mahaprabhu was extremely happy to take darshan of Lord Jagannath. But then when Snan Yatra happened, after that, the Lord then went into his Anavasra Kala. That's when his body becomes, as Prabhupada says, renovated. It's during this time that the Lord's body is repainted, and at a certain period or after a certain period of time, sometimes the Lord's body is completely given anew. They go and find the appropriate wood and so on and so forth, and the Shabras come and they again carve Lord Jagannath and repaint him. So this particular period, Mahaprabhu becomes extremely unhappy, not being able to see the Lord. And this is our current position right now as well. We're in lockdown and we're not able to see the Lord. So here, Mahaprabhu, what he does, he takes the next step, how he can mitigate this separation he feels from the Lord. He goes to Alalanath. Alalanath's just a bit further away from Jagannath Puri. And it's mentioned the deity there of Alalanath is the four-handed form of Krishna, not Vishnu. And it's that form of the Lord that the Lord showed the gopis in the forest of Vrindavan. So when the gopis went looking for Krishna in the forest, there they saw Narayan, right? He's standing there with 4 hands. And they asked Narayan, so where did Krishna go? And Narayan pointed in all 4 directions. Right? So actually that wasn't Narayan, that was Krishna with his 4 extra 2 hands. It's mentioned that after these gopis left, when Srimati Radharani appeared, then Krishna, out of his ecstatic emotions, his 2 hands fell. He could not hold that form in front of Srimati Radharani. He couldn't bewilder her. So therefore he then manifested his original form of 2-handed form, Shyam Sundar, in front of her. Anyway, so Alalanath is that deity of the Lord. It's actually mentioned, if you go to Alalanath, you'll see a rock there, and you'll see when Mahaprabhu went into ecstasy, he lay down on that rock and it melted. So you'll see that impression of his body there in Alalanath. So when he went to Alalanath, naturally what did the devotees feel in Puri? Complete separation and dejection. Because look, he came, he showed his form and his manifest pastimes, and then he left for 2 years to Puri, to South India. And then he again comes back, and then again disappears. What is this? So then the Lord's pastimes, or the Lord's going to Alalnath, greatly disappointed the devotees. So what they did was they went after Mahaprabhu. They sent Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and other senior associates of the Lord to bring him back. And what was their excuse to bring him back? My Lord, your devotees from Bengal, they're coming to Puri very soon, so you should come back to Puri. So they immediately bring Mahaprabhu back to Puri. So at this time, this is when the devotees of Bengal arrive, headed by Advaita Acharya, Srivas Thakur, Sivananda Sen, the Ghosh brothers, Vasudev Ghosh, Mukunda Ghosh, and Basu Ghosh, and so on and so forth, all the great associates of the Lord. So then what happened at that particular point in time, they waited in Narendra Sarovar. It's a small lake just outside of Puri, and it's mentioned by Prabhupada that it's a custom, it's a great tradition of the Bengali devotees that before they enter Puri, they follow their ancestors and take bath in Narendra Sarovar before entering into Puri. So then, at that point in time, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya meets King Prataparudra, and Gopinath Acharya, the brother-in-law of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, appears there at the same time. Now, Gopinath Acharya spent a lot of time in Navadvip during the Lord's pastimes as a child. So Gopinath Acharya knows all the devotees of Bengal. Excuse me. So then what happens is that Prataparudra Maharaj and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, along with I just said his name, Gopinath Acharya, they went up to the highest point of the palace, and they were looking to see where all these devotees were coming. And it's during that time that King Prataparudra was seeing all the Bengali devotees, and he was seeing that, because this is the first time Prataparudra Maharaj is actually seeing the associates of the Lord. So far he just simply heard from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya what's happening. Now he's actually seeing the Nityasiddha devotees of the Lord, the associates of the Lord. So it's mentioned there that he asks Bhattacharya, please, can you kindly describe all the devotees present here so that I may know about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates? And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says that, I know some of them, but actually here's Gopinath Acharya. He has been there in Bengal, he knows them. He'll explain who is who and what their service is to the Lord. So then at that time they saw two devotees coming from Puri and approaching the party. And that happened to be Swarup Damodar and Govinda, the personal associate of Lord Chaitanya. And Maharaj Prataparudra asked, so who's that? Who are they? Who are they? What are they doing? And he said, and Gopinath Acharya says, this is Swarup Damodar. He's the personal secretary of the Lord, a very dear associate of the Lord. And that is Govinda, his personal servant. And he's very expert in his service. And then they're saying, so what are they doing? And they're going forward with garland and sandalwood pulp to receive the devotees of Bengal. And so who are they giving the garland to first? Who is that effulgent personality? That is Advaita Acharya. And so on, he starts explaining all of the different associates of the Lord. And this is where Srila Prabhupada he very carefully he explains here that actually the devotees of the Lord, they're not ordinary living entities. Srila Narottama Das Thakur has sung actually, I'll see if I can get them here, that in his prayer that the Lord's associates, they're all known as Nityasiddhas. See if I can find it for you. Yeah, so then Mahaprabhu's associates explain one by one. Advaita Acharya, he's honored even by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's therefore the topmost devotee. Here's Srivas Pandit, Vakreshwar Pandit, Vidyanidhi Acharya and Gadadhar Pandit. Here Acharya Ratna, Pundara Pandita, Gangadas Pandit, Sankara Pandit. Here are Murari Gupta, Pandit Narayan and Haridas Thakur, the deliverer of the whole universe. Here is Hari Bhatta and there is Nishimananda. Here are Vasudev Dutt and Shivananda Sen. Here are also Govinda Ghosh, Madhava Ghosh, Vasudev Ghosh. They are three brothers and their Sankirtan congregational chanting pleases the Lord very much. Here's Raghava Pandit, here's Acharya Ratna, Acharya Nandana, there is Shriman Pandit, and here are Srikanta and Narayana. Purport, Narottam Das Thakur, honoring the personal associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, has sung as follows in his Pratana song number 13. Gaurangera Sangi Gane, Nitya Siddhakari Mane, Yes, say Yai Vrajendra Sutapas. That one who's intelligent understands that all the personal associates and devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are ever liberated. And then Prabhupada, he talks about what a Nitya Siddha is. A Nitya Siddha is one who's engaged in the Lord's devotional service 24 hours daily and never forgets the Lord. That's a Nitya Siddha. But if you continue reading this purport, Prabhupada completely blows your mind. Prabhupada says that one should not think that because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was personally present 500 years ago, only his associates were liberated. Rather, Srila Narottam Das Thakur says that anyone is a Nitya Siddha if he acts on behalf of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by spreading the glories of the holy name of the Lord. We should respect those devotees preaching the glories of the Lord as Nitya Siddha and should not consider them conditioned. And Prabhupada then further qualifies that statement by saying that the Nitya Siddha devotees, they're on the Brahman platform, but they work on that Brahman platform, which is a very interesting thing. Now, simply by accepting the associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Nitya Siddha, one can very easily go home back to Godhead. So if you just simply do that one thing, that accept the associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Nitya Siddha devotees, you can very easily go home back to Godhead. So this is the extreme mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So continuing on here, after explaining who the devotees are, Maharaj Pratapruja starts commenting on a few things. First he says that after seeing these devotees, I've never seen such an effulgence. Their effulgence is like brilliance of million suns, nor have I ever seen the Lord's name chanted so melodiously. So Prabhupada talks about these two things. The devotees are very bright like sunshine and their luster is very effulgent. And that's only if they strictly follow the principles of devotional service. And the second is that there may be many professional chanters who perform congregational chanting, but when a devotee chants purely from the heart, that attractiveness cannot be imitated by any professional chanter. So Maharaj Prataparuja is qualifying these devotees of the Lord. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya takes it even a step further. He says that actually these devotees, they're performing Prem Sankirtan. You will not, Maharaj Prataparuja says, I've never heard this chanting or dancing before. I've never seen this style before. And Bhattacharya tells him, yes, that's because this is the Prem Sankirtan of the Lord. So you can understand the Lord specifically brought his Nitya Siddha devotees to show Prem Sankirtan. Just as the Lord revealed the exalted status of the gopis and their pure devotional service for him by giving us his pastimes in 10th canto of Bhagavatam. Similarly, the Lord brought his personal associates, the Nitya Siddha devotees, to give the world Prem Sankirtan, which is ordinarily inaccessible, especially by the most fallen in the age of Kali. So he brought his devotees simply to give this benediction, this treasure. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says that, yeah, this is the Prem Sankirtan congregational chanting in love of Godhead. And in this age, Kali, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has descended to preach religion of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, the chanting of the holy names of Lord Krishna is the religious principle of this age. And he quotes Krishna Varanam Tusha Krishnam, Sangapangashta Parshadam, Yagnai Sankirtana Praya, Yajantihi Sumedasaha. That one who's actually intelligent, they will engage in the Sankirtan mission of the Lord. So, after all of this, Prataparudra Maharaj then asks, hey, they're bringing Mahaprasad to the devotees. How come the devotees are just eating Mahaprasad now? Like, shouldn't they wait before they go into the temple? They have to bathe, then they should shave their head, and then they should perform all these rituals, these religious principles before eating Mahaprasad, because that's how you enter the Dham. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says that actually these are all indirect principles or rituals. If the direct order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead was to take prasad, you're a fool not to follow that. So they took prasad because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered them to take prasad. In fact, what to speak of them, when I was sleeping, Mahaprabhu came and I woke up and I ate the Mahaprasad rice without taking shower. So he gave himself as an example, teaching Maharaj Prataparudra that actually the order of the Lord should be taken first. And then Prabhupada quotes a bit of Sarva Dharmam Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, that actually the Lord's instructions take priority over all other instructions, indirect instructions. So once that sort of discussion comes to an end, then it's mentioned that they enter into the Maharaj Prataparudra, still seeing this, the devotees enter into the Simadwara, or the front entrance of the temple, and they go past it to go and reach Kashi Mishra's house where Mahaprabhu is staying. But as they're going there, Mahaprabhu comes out of his residence to reach them and meet them. And he embraces all of them. And it's mentioned that when he embraces Advaita Acharya, the ecstatic emotions that came, he held it back, seeing time, place and circumstance. You can understand, they just came traveling from Bengal and they come to see Mahaprabhu. If Mahaprabhu goes into ecstasy, they don't know when he's going to come back to external consciousness. And second, we don't know what the circumstances was, what they were at that time. Whether devotees there were able to see such, were qualified to see such intimate dealings or not. So Mahaprabhu checked himself and took him to his home. And it's mentioned he took all the Bengali devotees to his home to the extent that his house was overflowing. They're all overflowing outside his house as well. And he sat each one of them down and he personally started rubbing and massaging them with sandalwood pulp and garlanded them and started speaking to them. To Advaita Acharya, he's glorifying Advaita Acharya and he's very pleased to see him. Then he asks Mukunda Dutt to come forward, the father of Mukunda Dutt, Vasudev Dutt, to come forward. And he glorifies that actually I think you are the more glorious than your son. And he says, no, actually my son is more glorious because he got personal association of you during your childhood days. So in that sense, I think he is my senior and I am his junior. And so on, and so this is how Mahaprabhu intimately deals with his devotees. So then once this exchange is happening and Mahaprabhu is churning this loving emotional exchange between his devotees, he then decides that now it's time to see Lord Jagannath. So he tells all of his devotees, you go and take bath in the sea, take darshan of the chakra above the temple, Chuda darshan, and then come back here. So then during that period of time, while Mahaprabhu was exchanging loving relations with the devotees, at that time, both Haridas Thakur and Murari Gupta were waiting outside. And Murari Gupta was just outside the door, thinking himself so fallen, why should I enter? How can I enter in front of the Lord? And all the Mahaprabhu was asking, so where's Murari Gupta? And all devotees immediately, it's mentioned that not one devotee, as soon as they heard where's Murari Gupta, a lot of devotees got up and ran to find Murari Gupta out of ecstasy. You know, the order of the Lord must be carried out. So they find Murari Gupta and Murari Gupta starts saying, I'm not qualified to see the Lord. I'm most abominable and sinful. I cannot see the Lord. So then they pull him in and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, please give up your humility and meekness. It's hurting me. And then he asks, so where's Haridas Thakur? And Haridas Thakur is so far away from the devotees. And he's still paying obeisances on the floor to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu out of great humility. And the devotees go forward to Haridas Thakur, please, the Lord is coming and asking you. He says, no, I cannot come. Lord Jagannath's temple is there and I'm the most sinful and fallen, the most abominable. I can't let them touch me. I can't let the devotees touch me and I can't let the associates of Lord Jagannath touch me, the pujaris, lest they become contaminated by my association. And Mahaprabhu understood Haridas Thakur's humility, and so Mahaprabhu just put a pause there. He parked it and he came back to it later. So after he had sent all his devotees to take bath, at that time Prataparudra Maharaj had sent Tulasi, the superintendent of the temple commander, and he then sent Kashi Mishra to Mahaprabhu, and he told them, you satisfy whatever the Lord wants. In fact, you should know what the Lord wants even before he says it, and you should immediately carry it out. So they went to the Lord, and this is a very interesting thing. They told the Lord that, would you like to have accommodation and prasadam and everything set up for your devotees? In fact, we've already done it, so we have everything ready for you. And so Mahaprabhu then tells Vaninath Roy to go and clean all the, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to go clean all the residences. I think it's Vaninath Roy. And then Vaninath Roy should come and bring the prasadam there. So then, that's when the devotees, they went to the sea, and then Mahaprabhu tells Kasi Mishra, I actually want a very secluded place just nearby here on the other side of the garden. I want that place only for me and Haridas Thakur. And if you read the Prabhupada, their Prabhupada really emphasizes that actually devotees should not be thinking about chanting Hare Krishna in solitary place. The devotees should be engaging all of their energy in preaching Krishna consciousness. And it's mentioned that only by the instruction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did Haridas Thakur stay there. So Prabhupada is saying, therefore it was authorized. So do not have the idea that you can simply go to a solitary place and chant Hare Krishna and make spiritual advancement. You'll just simply end up falling down and becoming attached to women and money, Prabhupada says. So, as Mahaprabhu goes to that place, he brings Haridas Thakur there and says, you take this place and you perform your devotional service here. When you perform your devotional service here, do not worry about a single thing. I will come and meet you here, and I will come and bring you prasadam. Don't worry about anything. You just simply stay here and perform your Nam Sankirtan. So then Mahaprabhu takes bath in the sea. It's mentioned that the devotees didn't act. They went to the sea, but they waited for Mahaprabhu to first take shower. So Mahaprabhu took a bath, and then he came back, and then the devotees took bath, and then they came back. When they came back to Mahaprabhu's residence, Mahaprabhu arranged prasadam to be served to them, because they'd traveled so far, and they came back. So then they all took prasad, and then they took rest after that. So after having taken rest, then they began kirtan. And they went and saw Lord Jagannath. And it's mentioned that it's during the Dhupa Arati that this kirtan was performed. And this is known as the Beda Kirtan. And as I was mentioning before, Prabhupada translates in the word for word that Beda means to circumambulate. So, let's see if I can find this section for you. So when Mahaprabhu went to perform kirtan, it's mentioned that all the devotees in Puri that were attending darshan at that time were completely astonished, hearing and seeing the loving ecstatic emotions of the Lord and His personal associates. Which meant that this Prem Sankirtan mission started to expand even further and overflow. That devotees who were there present in Jagannath Puri before weren't accustomed to this Prem Sankirtan. If they were accustomed, then it would have meant that the Lord's internal potency had covered them. But they displayed this astonishment seeing the pastimes of the Lord in chanting and dancing. Now, in this chanting and dancing, it is always mentioned throughout Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that everyone that was involved, they floated in an ecstatic ocean of love. To the extent it's mentioned that the sound vibration of that Harinam, Sankirtan, it penetrated throughout the whole universe. It permeated throughout the universe. Everyone was hearing the holy names of the Lord chanted in that particular place. So hearing this, again, Maharaj Pratap went up to the top of his palace and he started watching the personal associates of the Lord dancing and chanting with the Lord. Now, after the Pushpanjali, after the flowers were offered to Lord Jagannath, Mahaprabhu during this, taking a step back, Mahaprabhu during this kirtan, he had arranged his kirtan party in such a way that there were 4 of them. And it's mentioned that those 4, there were 8 mridangas and 48 kartals. And they were all around Mahaprabhu while he chanted and danced in the center. And so then after some time Mahaprabhu, he then took all the devotees around the temple by chanting and dancing. At that time, it's mentioned all 4 Sankirtan parties, they were either behind him or in front of him as he went forward doing the circumambulation of the Jagannath temple, chanting and dancing. And he kept doing this. He kept chanting and dancing and going all the way around. And it's mentioned here that while they were chanting very loudly and Mahaprabhu was dancing, jumping high, after dancing for a long time, Mahaprabhu decided to stop. He just stood still. And he ordered 4 great personalities to start dancing. He ordered Nityananda Ram, Lord Nityananda, to start dancing. He asked Advaita Acharya to dance in another group. Vakreshwar Pandit was in the 3rd group, and the 4th group was Srivas Thakur, and they began to dance. Now you have to understand, the way the Kirtan party was arranged was Mahaprabhu had stood still. So he was in the center, and all 4 were in all 4 directions surrounding him. And when they all 4 were surrounding him, those 4 prominent personalities, Nityananda Ram, Advaita Acharya, Vakreshwar Pandit, and Srivas Thakur, they all started dancing in front of those groups, in front of Mahaprabhu. And it's mentioned that just as when Krishna was sitting and he was taking prasad with his Gopa friends, and he was sitting like as if it was a whirl of a lotus, sitting in the center, and all his Gopa friends were around him, and each one of them saw Krishna looking at him only. Similarly, Mahaprabhu manifested that same Shakti, so that these dancers, each one of them, thought that Mahaprabhu was only looking at them. And this was what astonished all the devotees present during that kirtan. And when seeing this, everyone started feeling more and more ecstatic, seeing that the miracle was being performed right in front of their eyes. Because you see, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu rarely displayed such mystic potencies, because he came to perform pastimes as the servant of the Lord. But when he performed this particular pastime of seeing all the devotees at the same time, the devotees took it as a great miracle, and they took it as a great blessing, an opportunity to always remember the Lord. So when someone came nearby Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu while dancing, Mahaprabhu embraced them. And upon seeing the great dancing, great love, and great Sankirtan, all the people of Jagannath Puri floated in an ecstatic ocean of love. And so then when hearing the greatness of the Sankirtan, Maharaj Prataparuja went, again this is the point, he went up and saw this performance, and being astonished, his eagerness to meet with the Lord increased unlimitedly more. So he became more and more eager to see the Lord. So when this kirtan finished, Mahaprabhu watched the offering of flowers to Lord Jagannath, and then he and all the Vaishnavas returned to his residence. Now you have to remember that this is still straight after the Sena Yatra period. So, actually this is just before the Sena Yatra period, because they were able to see the Lord and how the arti was being performed to the Lord. Generally, Prabhupada says in the next purport, in the section where generally people come and take darshan, but after the Sena Yatra, there's no darshan of Lord Jagannath. So after this Sankirtan, what's the next thing on the agenda? Prasad. So the Tulasi, the superintendent of the temple, he brought large quantities of prasad to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he personally distributed to all his devotees. So after doing that, he took a rest, and this is how Kaviraj Goswami finishes this chapter, that as long as the devotees remained in Jagannath Puri with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the pastime of Sankirtan was performed with great jubilation every day. In this way I have explained the Lord's pastime of Sankirtan, and I bless everyone with this benediction. By listening to this description, one will surely become a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he ends, praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Jagannath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. So that's the 11th chapter, the Beda Kirtan pastimes. Simply a taste of what's to come when Mahaprabhu experiences the Ratha Yatra pastimes. Now chapter 12, we go into more details. This is the cleaning of the Gundicha temple, and we go into more details about how Maharaj Prataparuja met the Bhattacharya before Mahaprabhu came to Puri again from South India, and how Bhattacharya's attempt failed, and how he took the letter of Prataparuja to the devotees to see and to petition them to talk to the Lord. Then Nityananda Ram then starts speaking to the Lord and petitions the Lord to see the king. And then Ramananda Roy's attempt. This is when Ramananda Roy actually comes to Puri. And a further elaboration of the discussion between Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy is given here. And that's when you start hearing about how Mahaprabhu ends up meeting the son of the king and embraces him. So the way this chapter goes is that after requesting Bhattacharya to please speak to the Lord and gain darshan, then Mahaprabhu rejected, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wrote a letter back to Maharaj Prataparudra, who was at Cuttack at that time. And then Maharaj Prataparudra sent a letter back to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya saying that what's the use of my life? Better to give it up. I'll become a mendicant and just roam free. Hopefully in a future life the son of Maharaj Nanda will then give me his darshan. So then it's mentioned there that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya became disturbed hearing this mood of Prataparudra Maharaj. So then he decided something has to happen. Something needs to happen to prevent this king from giving up his duties. So the king then says, please, I'm going to write a letter to petition the devotees of the Lord. You please give it to them and please seek their mercy and their blessings. Hopefully the Lord will give me his darshan this way. So then when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya then takes the letter to all the devotees become astonished seeing his bhakti. They mention, this is the letter, that if Gaurahari Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will not show mercy to me, I shall give up my kingdom and become mendicant and beg from door to door. So this is the exact same thing the devotees read. And reading this, they become extremely astonished that Maharaj Prataparudra had so much loving devotion for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So then they decided, okay, so unfortunately the Lord will never meet the king. But if we ask the Lord about this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will become even more unhappy. So what do we do? So then they decide, okay, they bring their determination and courage together. We'll just go and ask the Lord. We'll just go and do it. We'll try our best. But the funny thing is that when they all went and approached Mahaprabhu, they could not speak a single thing. And so Mahaprabhu was looking at them and they were looking at Mahaprabhu and they could not utter a single word. Sometimes that happens when you come before a superior personality. You come with so many questions and I'll have darshan of this person and all my questions I'll get them satisfied. And you go in front of this personality and you'll pay obeisances, and then after the formalities of receiving one another, then when you come to ask your questions, nothing is there. You look at the person and they look at you. I still remember when I first met my spiritual master. I remember when I went and met him, I thought, okay, I have so many questions about life, I have so many things I want to get sorted out, I'll go and ask him about such and this and that. So I was practicing devotional service a bit, so I had many questions and I wrote them down on a list, a piece of paper. Before that, I went and met him. And I went to meet him and I paid obeisances and he received me and we talked, and then nothing came. No questions came. All the questions I thought that were important, I needed to speak, nothing came. And we ended up discussing something else and talking about how to practice devotional service, so on and so forth. And when I came out of that meeting, and I realized actually those questions weren't really needed. I didn't really need to ask those questions. So then the next time I thought, okay, let me go with a list of questions. So I wrote down the questions and went, and when I went, again, I completely forgot that I'd written a list of questions, and I started speaking different things. So in the same way, a little glimpse of what the devotees experienced when they met Mahaprabhu. That they went towards Mahaprabhu knowing what they're going to say is going to make him unhappy. But we have to do it for the sake of Maharaj Prataparudra. Later on in Antya-lila, when Chota Haridas gets banished by the Lord, the devotees do the same thing. But Mahaprabhu is even more vehement. He says, if you keep coming to me and asking me, I'll just go to Alalnath. I'll leave you guys here in Puri. You can do whatever you like, just don't disturb me. I'll go to Alalnath. So the same way here, the devotees are very cautious. If we do anything that will displease Mahaprabhu, we may not get his darshan or his association again, being displeased with us. So they went to the Lord. They could not say anything. That's when Sri Nityananda Ram came forward. And Mahaprabhu was looking at them. So what have you come for? What do you want to tell me? And so Nityananda Prabhu says, we want to tell you something, although we cannot say without speaking. We cannot stay without speaking. We are still very much afraid to speak. Nityananda Ram is buttering up Mahaprabhu, easing it in, very, very carefully. We want to submit before you something that may or may not be befitting. The matter is this: unless he sees you, the king of Orissa will become a mendicant. Bang, straight, delivered to Mahaprabhu. And Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu continues. The king has decided to become a mendicant and accept the sign of a mendicant by wearing an ivory earring. Prabhupada says in the purport that sometimes mendicants, they will, pierce their ears and they'll wear an earring, and that will signify them as mendicants, and that this will allow them to go door to door and so on and so forth. He does not want to enjoy his kingdom without seeing the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so Nityananda Ram then glorifies him, saying he wants to see your lotus-like face. He cannot live without it. He wants to see it to his full satisfaction. He cannot live without it. So then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, I can understand that you all desire to take me to Cuttack to see the king. But what to speak of spiritual advancement? All the people will blaspheme me. See, the purpose Mahaprabhu took sannyas, people will, show some respect and then take up devotional service. But if he goes against that and does something and they blaspheme him, the whole purpose of sannyas is ruined. So Mahaprabhu knew the gravity of that particular decision. So he even took a step further and said, here's Damodar. He will chastise me very severely if I go and do such a thing. And Damodar says to the Lord, actually you're the Supreme Personality Godhead, completely independent, you can do whatever you like. So you know what is permissible, what is not permissible. Whatever you do becomes immediately permissible, so please do whatever you like. The hidden thing behind it is that Prabhupada says that Damodar Pandit was very pure devotee of the Lord, very affectionate to the Lord, very much attached to the Lord, that he could not tolerate anyone saying anything bad to the Lord. So therefore he would often correct the Lord when the Lord performed his pastimes, because the Lord is Bhakta Vatsala. He knows how to engage in loving relations with his devotees, to the extent he knows what to give up and what to take. Just like on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he gave up his vow to protect Arjuna. Similarly, Mahaprabhu knew how to circumvent, how to arrange or act in such a way so that the loving devotion with his devotees increases more and more. So Damodar would always correct the Lord, my Lord, you can't do like this, you can't do like that, don't do like this. And Prabhupada says that actually that criticism of the Lord Mahaprabhu is indirectly chastising Damodar, saying that you should not do anything like this. A subordinate should not correct the superior. It is against all Vaishnava etiquette. So then Damodar, understanding that, Damodar Pandit then starts glorifying the Lord. My Lord, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anything you do, you don't need permission to do it. You can do it yourself. So then Mahaprabhu is still hesitant. So then Nityananda Ram says, then okay, so who in the three worlds can actually ask you to see the king if you don't want to see the king? So therefore I have an idea. To further delay the king from giving up his life, better you give him a piece of your cloth. That will give him some hope that in the future that he'll be able to see you. That way he'll maintain his life and his dharma, his occupational duty. So then Mahaprabhu agrees. But in one sense it's still a failure, because they haven't really attained that goal of the conversation of Maharaj Prataparudra meeting Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Or rather the other way around, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu agreeing to meet Prataparudra Maharaj. So then what happens? The king receives the cloth and he worships the cloth as if it was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly, being the Mahaprasad of the Lord. So then after this, Ramananda Roy appears in the scene. And Ramananda Roy then, this is when I had mentioned before, he had met the king embraced him, the king mentioned that what's the point of my living, hopefully in a future birth I'll see the son of Maharaj Nanda, Lord Chaitanya. And that's when Ramananda Roy informed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about the ecstatic symptoms of love that Prataparudra Maharaj had actually displayed. So here, describing this love for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu coming from the mouth of Ramananda Roy, Mahaprabhu's heart began to soften and soften and soften. But then he said that you should make this request duly considering whether it's benefiting a sannyasi to meet a king or not. So still Mahaprabhu was holding on. Still Mahaprabhu knew what needed to be done, what shouldn't be done. So then Ramananda Roy addressed Mahaprabhu that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What are you talking about, all these sannyas items? You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you can do anything you like. And that's when Mahaprabhu says that, actually I'm not a Supreme Personality of Godhead, I am just an ordinary human being. Therefore I must fear public opinion in 3 ways, with my body, mind and words. So then Ramananda Roy says that you delivered so many sinful people, what about this one king? That's when Mahaprabhu says, there may be much milk in a big pot, but if it's contaminated by a drop of liquor, it's untouchable. Similarly, the king may possess all good qualities, but taking up the name of the king, he has infected everything. But you do one thing. It's mentioned the son is as good as the father, so bring me the king's son. So then this is when Ramananda Roy informs the king, and the king's son comes. But the king's son is decorated and dressed as if he was Brajendranandan Krishna, with a yellow dhoti. And the son of the king was naturally dark in complexion, with lotus-like eyes. So when he had appeared in front of Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu immediately remembered Sri Krishna in the forest of Vrindavan. And he remembered all the Vrindavan pastimes of the Lord. He immediately checked his emotions and embraced this boy. And embracing the boy, he started showing ecstatic symptoms. And the boy, after feeling the embrace of the Lord, he started jumping and dancing in madness, in mad ecstasy, chanting Hari Hari and chanting the holy names of the Lord. And when he started showing all of these symptoms, it's mentioned that Mahaprabhu calmed him down and told him, you should come here and meet me daily. So when Ramananda Roy took the boy back to the palace, Maharaj Prataparudra embraced his son. And while embracing the son, it's mentioned that he was filled with ecstatic love, just as if he had touched Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly. Just like the queens of Dwarka, when Krishna appeared or came back to Dwarka, they sent the sons first and then embraced the sons, physically feeling the embrace of the Lord, but then internally within the core of their hearts embracing the Lord as well. Similarly, Prataparudra Maharaj also displayed this ecstatic feeling, this ecstatic emotion. So you can understand the sensitivity of the devotees' feelings of love for the Lord. It is so inconceivable. Prabhupada says it's like a compact of love. The devotee and the Lord is always together. They're never separable. And the loving devotion that they have for each other is very difficult for ordinary living entities to understand. But Kaviraj Goswami is kindly giving us a glimpse to understand the intense devotion that each display to one another. So that's how Ramananda Roy's attempt, the attempts of all 3 devotees, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Nityananda Ram and Ramananda Roy, how they somehow or other pacified the Lord. And that's the first section of this chapter. The next section talks about Gundicha Marjanam. So now we've come to the end of today's session. Next session, which is tomorrow night, we'll talk a bit about Gundicha Marjana. We'll talk about how Gopal was revived by the Lord during the Sankirtan pastime, and how they accepted prasadam in Gundicha Marjan. One thing I did forget to mention was that when the Lord met the devotees, there's also an interaction of Mahaprabhu serving the devotees their prasad. So after they took their bath in the sea, and before they went and saw Lord Jagannath for the Beda pastime Kirtan, there's a section there talking about how Mahaprabhu served the devotees. And it's mentioned that when all the devotees came, Mahaprabhu served them so much that he could not serve less than 2 or 3 people's worth of prasad for the devotees. And it's mentioned the devotees, they would hold their hands over their plate. And the reason why was that they would not take their prasad until Mahaprabhu sat down to take prasad. And we'll see a bit more of that after the Gundicha Marjanam pastime, where the Lord is cleaning the Gundicha temple. And then we'll talk a bit more about how Mahaprabhu received the Lord on the Ratha Yatra, during the Ratha Yatra procession. And finally we'll see in the 14th chapter, hopefully we'll get to see maybe a summary of Mahaprabhu's dealings with his devotees, talking about the Vrindavan pastimes. And that's where you'll hear about the very famous pastime of how Lakshmi, seeing that Lord Jagannath had gone to Gundicha and had stayed there for a long period of time, she came to grab him and bring him back. And that's where Sarup Damodar and Srivas Thakur have a bit of a debate on whether Vaikuntha or Vrindavan is the most opulent dham of the Lord. And that's another very sweet pastime, because it ends in a very ecstatic kirtan that the Lord personally leads. So that's what we'll talk about tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening. Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai. Shri Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami ki jai. Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai. Jai Nithai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.